Thưa quý vị, chúng tôi xin có một cái câu chuyện về tị nạn nữa, rồi chúng tôi sẽ qua một cái chương mới để chúng ta học hỏi về cái kinh nghiệm đó. Nhưng mà trước khi chúng tôi qua cái chương đó thì I will ask Mr. Trung Phạm, another successful CEO of a company called Five Nine Business Solution and Archer. Trung Phạm himself is not a refugee, but he was born in a refugee family. And I know, like Long said, our story, we like to hoard things. We keep, there's a lot of funny things about Vietnamese refugee that this guy suffered. So I'd like him to share with us. Mời Trung.
Okay. Cảm ơn anh. Actually, correction, I was in trại Ga Lăng. Yeah.
Oh, 2 years old.
Yeah, I was qua Mỹ hồi 2 tuổi. So I came here when I was 2 years old.
Wow, it's more.
Left Vietnam before I was 1, I believe. Right, something around there. So it's so interesting because I always think about everything that goes on in our lives shapes our perspective on things, right? And those perspectives, you shape enough of those perspectives, they become principles, and those principles become what we believe. And no agenda or anything like that, but I've learned, I saw firsthand my mother, my father, my aunts, my cousins, my uncles, my aunts. There's not a single family here that did not lose someone during Bộ Biên, right? We have horrible stories about that. So we already count ourselves blessing, just as An said over here. Were we lucky or were we not lucky? And then, growing up, one of the first words I learned in Vietnamese was "nợ," right? Nợ của bố mẹ, right? Bố mẹ had me come over here for opportunity, like An Mai talked about. And so for me, at a very base level, doing well in school, getting a job, being a good person, was barely scratching the surface of paying off that debt. And that's what I really want to think about, and what I want the youth to think about, especially those that are actually becoming first generation Vietnamese Americans. That we're not even first generation, right? Because we weren't born here. And that debt doesn't get finished paying until we pay that forward, right? I'm more than likely, I can tell, probably not the smartest person up here on the stage, right? So I like to simplify things. And when I think of, there's no way you turn on the TV nowadays and you don't hear about immigration and things of that nature. So one of the first things that I thought I had to do as a Vietnamese person in the United States is I had to represent Vietnamese people correctly, right? Because I didn't want to fast forward 20, 30 years later and people think, well, Vietnamese people are rapists and killers and murderers and things like that. And it's a perspective thing. When you simplify the idea of immigration, I'm a very simple-minded person. I think of it as very simple. We're all in our house, we're sleeping at night, 3 o'clock in the morning, someone knocks on our door asking us for help. We don't answer that door or we open the door, that's up to us. I don't blame the person that doesn't open the door for that person out there, because we could be afraid, we don't know who they are, they could be strangers. But in 1975 to 1997, 3 major countries, the United States, Australia, and Canada, opened their doors to us. That at some point, it's huge. That should fundamentally change our perspective on how we view the idea of immigration, right? If you want to see how humanity is going to become, just watch us go in and out of a door. Some of us hold doors for others. Some of us open the door, let it close behind the next person. Some of us sneak through the door so we don't have to touch the door, right? Right? But that tells you everything you need to know about humanity. What kind of person, what kind of people will we become? Because I can tell you right now, the na isn't ja, just because we're successful and we can afford better things for ourselves. The na is only possible if we understand that that needs to be paid forward to other Vietnamese generations, other refugees. We are not immigrants. That's a very key distinction we have to understand. Our people, and to Professor over here, when she was explaining kind of our war-torn history and our migration, we're not immigrants, we are political refugees. We didn't come here legally either. But by the grace of God and the graciousness of a few countries, we had another start and we had another life. And so for us, that's how I've learned to shape my perspective on things. And that's not to be political, that's not to be conservative, liberal, or anything like that. But I just hope you guys can slowly start to think about that with your children, of how you view things like that, before we are the first ones to shut our doors, because it's nice and cozy and we got in now and we're successful. So that's what I have to say.
I'd like to kind of focus on the question of how, like we start. And my question is, especially from the people who work with the youth, teacher, activists, but I would like to look at the business community too, like Chung or Long. You have something to offer on how to work with the young Vietnamese?
Sure. Not necessarily. Our company hires a lot of youth, so I understand everyone here is complaining about Gen Z, and I have quite a few of them on my payroll. So I understand they're different. I always make the joke, you're getting old when you start complaining about the young, right? That's the truth. I remember being complained about by my parents as well. So it's now my turn to do the same thing for the next generation. I would say that where my experience comes into play in the business world is also, I unfortunately do not have a lot of business in the Vietnamese community, so I deal a lot with other cultures in the accounting and finance field. And I think it's important for me, and I think one of the reasons why when Ji Chang asked me to kind of be involved with this, and for An Long and I to kind of raise money to kind of be corporate sponsors for this, it was a passion of mine, because I wanted to be able to also tell my colleagues and my friends and people I've been doing business with for the last 20 years why I make the decisions I make, and where I come from is the reason why I think the way I do. And that's the way I do business a certain way, right? And a lot of times that doesn't align with traditional American culture. And I can relate to a lot of you youth out there, because since I came here when I was 2 years old, sometimes I don't feel like I'm Vietnamese, and sometimes I don't feel like I'm American, right? I don't speak English as well as I probably could, and I don't speak Vietnamese as well as I want to as well, right? So we get stuck and we fall in that line, because we're not even considered first generation Vietnamese Americans, right? And so dealing with the youth, they have a different way of communicating. It doesn't mean it's bad, and I can tell you this as a business owner, we have to adapt to them. They are not adapting to us. That is not going to happen. That's not how the world works, right? So we have to continue to find ways to be patient. Psychologically, one of the easiest ways to do it is talk about them. Everyone loves to talk about themselves, so if you make it relatable to them, they're more likely to do it. We all, throughout our lives, go on at some point on self-discovery. So at some point, your children are going to want to know more about themselves and about why they look a little bit different than everybody else. And that's when your opportunity is there, right? And I love so many of the answers that we've given today, especially over there, which is we have to be flexible. There's a reason why we're more apt to listen to our teachers than our parents. Because our parents are so rigid, and especially Vietnamese parents, right? There's only, I grew up, I only thought I could only be La Su or Bác Sĩ. Seriously, I didn't, I had no other option, right? And so having that flexibility, and having that flexibility in our culture is very important. And I think that's the only way we can learn from each other and preserve what we can. And really quickly, I do want to kind of mention, the importance of learning all of Vietnam's history over the last 5,000 years. I think there's a sense of urgency in this room, because the truth of the matter is I'm probably one of the younger people that went Vietnam, right? And so in the next 30 to 40 years, depending how blessed I am to stay alive, if we are not going to continue to pass on our version of history, because as we know, history is written by the winners. And it's not something we want to say openly, but we didn't win. So if we have to rely on the Viet Cong over in Vietnam to write our history over those 20 or 30 years, it's not going to be at all what we want it to be. So it's very important for all of us in this room and our children, our generation, to memorialize these stories, memorialize the reason why we're here. Those were triggering events, right? Vietnam has a luscious, beautiful history for the last 4,000 years. But the reason we're specifically in the United States, in Australia, and Canada, is because of the events that unfolded in 1975. And even 1954 before then, that forced us down. And so it's important for us to have those historical backgrounds, because if we don't write our own story, if we don't remember our own story, do not expect others to write our story correctly for us. So,
Yeah.